He has the discipline that comes from being a soldier in Her Majesty's Royal Canadian Armed Forces many, many years ago. Sir, yes, sir. After he left the military, he's done a number of amazing things. He spent 15 years in the crypto world. And some of you are going, wait a second, 15 years? That's right, cryptography. 15 years in cryptography, 12 years in the world of finance. Founded his own finance company in the United States of America, down south of the border, as we call it. Did extraordinarily well. He worked with McKinsey, but now he has become a serial entrepreneur. He started that business in finance, and now he has a new, exciting, and innovative blockchain platform that is out there in the world and is going to be the future of blockchain. Please welcome the CEO and founder of TodaQ, Hassan Khan. Bring it on, brother.
Thank you.
All right.
It's great to be here. It's been a fantastic few days. Over the last few years, as we've been building a company that spans between Canada, South Korea, London, Dubai, Cayman, and a couple other countries, we've always been back to Hong Kong, so it's great to be back. My name is Hassan Khan, as Andrew was mentioning. I'm the CEO and co-founder of TodaQ. We are a fintech bank of the future. And we serve enterprise companies, banks, as well as governments and smart cities. And on the company side, this stretches the range from resources and mining, energy, oil and gas, infrastructure, pharmaceuticals, education, retail, digital media, and the sharing economy. And what's funny is, although I described almost everything, for all of those companies, we do just one thing. And that one thing matters to all of them. And what we do is we provide them a platform and an ability to basically have decentralized ownership, management, and settlement of all of their digital assets. Whether that is goods, intangible or tangible, services, identity, or money. And the platform that's provides a few kind of major sources of value. The most major one is that this allows them to own, transact, and settle without intermediaries or cost, as well as to have that immutable proof and authenticity in the assets that they have, almost the same way that the gaming tokens were described before. Imagine if you could do that for everything. And then the final thing is frictionless interoperability, so that the assets themselves are no longer restricted by those enterprise or organizational silos. And all of this is made possible because we have built on top of a new protocol that is totally decentralized, distributed, but it's also public, permissionless, blockless, and ledgerless with a chain, which sounds almost backwards, like an orthogonal departure away from the blockchain world. So we're going to go down this rabbit hole and find out how does that lead to the ideas of loyalty and royalty, and why the STO is just a temporary stop to where we actually all want to go. We've had a few major things go on in the world. One of them everybody knows. We're getting a lot more people. How many? Well, pretty much every 2 or 3 months, we have a new city of Shanghai on the planet. It's a staggering pace of growth. But that is dwarfed by the next, which is really how much more data is being produced every day. And you can see that that number is a silly number of zeros on it, almost inconceivable. But what's a little more insane is that out of all that data being produced on a daily basis, most of it is junk. And very little of it is actually meaningful. And this leads to a couple of challenges. But before we get to the challenges, the question is, how did we get to a place where we are producing that much more data every day and it's just increasing? And really what it comes down to is you find that every technology disruption that's taken over the globe, it's always had one thing in common. And that thing has been that it's been a steamroller of efficiency or commoditization. So the technological wave that comes in, it's so efficient that the service it's being providing is nearly costless or nearly free. And when that moment happens, that's when you actually get the disruption that flattens out old industries and destroys them. Because you have a service that's ubiquitous. It's like breathing air, and you expect it. But you will refuse to pay for it. There's no revenue model anymore. There's no profit to be had. And if you don't believe me, you can go to the Starbucks right downstairs around the corner, and you can sit down and order a coffee and spend 10 hours in there and communicate with anyone you want to in the world for free. And this is exactly what the trinity of telecommunications, the internet, and software did for communication. It commoditized it to the point where you expect it, but you won't pay for it. But one of the things that that did is it created this amazing post-internet world. But it gave us a couple of challenges. And the first challenge was that of trust. And trust you could describe really simply in terms of, what is this data or digital asset, or this thing that is being presented to me? Where did it come from? Who owns it now and is accountable for it? And every day and year by year, we see increasing challenges and stresses in this area. Whether it's something to do with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, challenges in our financial or business markets, you can see the challenge of trust in everything we do. The next is the challenge of efficiency, because we might have solved the communication piece and flattening those costs, or what was described as the transaction portion of the network, kind of in the previous talk. But what wasn't commoditized was the settlement of value. So that if one person is passing an asset or something of value to someone else, that they can prove that it's valid, it's unique, that they own it, and that that ownership can be transferred to the recipient, so the recipient can easily prove that to anyone on Earth in an efficient and secure way. And we've seen the challenge of efficiency grow to the point where this is one of the reasons, not the only one, why the financial sector has increased in size relative to the rest of the economy. Because the requirement for all kinds of intermediary services to bring and address that trust has increased. So the inefficiency has also increased. Blockchains showed up as one family of a much larger world of decentralized technologies that I've actually been involved in other spheres probably since the 1990s. And decentralized technologies, everyone knows, just promised two simple things. They said, hey, we're going to solve trust and we're going to solve efficiency. And we're going to do that by decentralizing the control so no one can manipulate history or change a settlement. And we're going to distribute the work, so we bring the cost base down. And we're going to crush settlements just like we did for communication. And in the last 10 years, we've had some very necessary and amazing innovation. But on the standard of getting to the globally everywhere ubiquitous breathe it like air, you're just going to get it, so far we failed. That 0.2% is the global market penetration that all the combined blockchain and other decentralized technologies have achieved. And the reason why it hasn't expanded more is because we haven't hit that point of massive commoditization. And this is what actual disruption looks like. So the curve you're looking at is actually the volume of IPOs on the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange from the 1980s right up until now. And that big mountain in the middle, that is the internet during the 1990s. And what you're seeing after that is the technologies, other new ones we've had to date, and nothing that looks like that so far, yet. So this gets to the whole issue of STOs and securities and what we're doing. And the question of, do we actually need those? And once decentralization becomes ubiquitous, are we actually going to have tokens? And if we look back to understand where we are going to go forward and we think about these financial instruments, they're actually super old. Things like stocks have been around for 2,000 or 3,000 years. That picture you're seeing is investors and workers in the Publicani, which were some of the first early private companies during the Roman Empire. And you had private investors that would invest in these companies that would work on public works and also do tax collection. And they had shares and stocks. Now, the interesting portion of this was that over all of those millennia, as we had companies and shares and insurance and all of these instruments, we went through a bunch of technological waves. The printing press, then the internet. And in each case, when these new things came in, we evolved the financial instruments and structure, but we didn't throw them out. And there's a reason for that. One reason is that when you actually get the technological disruption correct, those old things just end up going on new rails. They don't become something new. And there's a reason for it. The reason why the global market trusts a stock or a bond or any one of these other things is because societies and people, I mean, even though technology can change really quickly, we only change so fast. And it takes years and decades, and in some cases centuries, to build all the infrastructure and process and solutions around things so that you get trust across an entire market. In monetary sense, for taxation, for securities law, looking at court challenges and everything else that goes on. One of the challenges that we had on the investment side when the STO showed up is we said, well, what do you need to take to actually have the thing be proven? And in some cases, that bar of proof is saying, we want to see it challenged in court with a supercreditor, like an IRS or a tax collector. And once you've had a set of decisions, then you know which way the die is going to roll. And then we have surety. But that's going to take years to get to. So the lesson there is that when it comes to those things, if you don't need to change it, don't necessarily reinvent. And the answer to that quiz is that post-internet, nothing changed its name or its nature. It became more efficient. We ended up with more of it. It provided greater access to more people, and it became less of a restricted market. So in this case, if we tie all that together, I would put to you that where we are going, there are going to be no tokens or tokenomics. You will just have the same stocks and insurance policies and financial instruments and debt instruments and equity instruments that we have today. They will just sit on new decentralized rails. And like the free Wi-Fi sign in that coffee shop window, no one will agree for the basic privilege of settlement because it will be efficient enough where it's free. So let's go back to the beginning and see what are we doing at TodaQ and what was I talking about with the Toda protocol, because it's not a blockchain. The challenge with blockchains is that they actually had shared ledgers and they're not doing distributed computing. What they're doing is replicated computing. And if anyone kind of wants to dig further into it, you know where to find me. I would also suggest that in the 90s, you actually had one of the first global distributed computer networks out there, and it still exists today. It's called distributed.net. And when you look at how that thing functions, it actually truly is doing distributed computing rather than replicated work on a shared ledger which compounds the inefficiency. So in the Toda world, it's much like the internet. All you have is packets and files and digital assets. But every file carries its own ledger, like a library book. This protocol turns the world into a gigantic library where you can actually have a quintillion assets flowing around, each one with its own uniqueness, its own immutable history, and its own absolutely provable owner who's accountable for it. And within that protocol, you also have actors or accounts. But rather than splitting apart where you say you've got a wallet and there's some other entity that's going to do the settling, it's all combined. every node or account has the right to own anything it wants. Any node or account can transact peer-to-peer with anyone for anything and get that thing settled in under a minute at nearly frictionless cost, or about half a milliwatt hour on average. And those assets themselves, you can put rules around like a smart contract, and they can fractionate and do a bunch of other things, which means you finally end up with that frictionless rail, much like the internet provided. So what are we doing with it? Well, later this year, that will start to go open source and be given to the world. On top of it, what we are doing is we've built a platform called Toda as a Service. And this makes it safe, secure, and easy for a business to put their things, their people, and their money onto the platform, so that when they are transacting cross-border across all their supply chains or within their consumer markets, there's no transaction fees because there's no cost. There's no intermediaries because they don't need them anymore. It means that for one of our projects, when we put the generic drugs in the factory in India and it flows its way across into Africa to the end consumer, that consumer can know with absolute proof what batch of pills from what factory they're holding in their hand in order to deal with pharmaceutical forgeries and fakes, which is about a 20% problem in that market. And it's the same story across all those other sectors. The interesting part is 2 years ago, when the global team was building the protocol, it had a settlement token, much like a Bitcoin or Ethereum. But the market and all the global partners said, pull it out. Make the protocol like the internet so all it understands is data, like HTTP or TCP/IP. But they looked at that token, which we called a Toda note, and they said, but we still want it, but as an asset backstop digital note that we can actually use for trade in goods and services. And we could actually push it out across all these companies like a loyalty plan, which means that as the protocol spreads, any account in Toda that's opened, you can own anything you want directly on it. You don't need a settlement token to actually transact with anything, but as a value add, what you get is a small grant of these Toda notes. And as any node, whether it's business or individual, does work, it algorithmically earns more. And work, very simply, is transacting with others or adding other nodes into the network. So this is what it looks like. In the center, TDN is your Toda notes, and there's 137 billion that will be created cryptographically over a period of a decade. That will have a backstop underneath that'll get built as they're distributed out of metals, land, and dollars. At the front end, the majority of it, when it's pushed out, is never sold. You simply open accounts and do work, and everyone earns more of them. And they can actually be used to buy goods and services and be useful in the market. And that's starting this year across all of those projects. But the interesting part is on the other end, on the investment side. There, it's just preferred stock, royalty agreements, and structures that have existed for a long, long time, which means that the investors, the banks, the tax authority, the regulators, everyone understands it 6 ways to Sunday. You don't need to go off the reservation. What you're doing is you're taking the old world and putting it on a better set of decentralized rails. It means that for all those assets that are sitting underneath the note, you can fractionate them and make those completely liquid and fungible, and then tradable in an exchange market. So that is actually what's being built, and that's just one specific example of showing a real-life, commercial, globally at-scale thing that is getting rolled out this year that doesn't require a single token because you're putting the actual assets we're using today directly onto a better platform. And that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Hassan Khan. Fantastic. All right, people, you can do a little better than that. I know it's late in the day. Come on, Hassan, great job.
Thank you.